The footage was grainy, shaky, and everywhere on the Maple Creek Neighborhood app. In the darkness of the playground, a shape stood still, a creature of shadow and rumor. A 175-pound German shepherd that looked more wolf than dog. They called him Havoc. A monster. A weapon. A lawsuit waiting to happen. Janet from 3B swore he ate her cat. The HOA president was already drafting the legal notice. They were all dangerously wrong. Because Havoc wasn't the threat, he was the warning. And the secret he sensed beneath their children's feet was so much worse than a dangerous dog could ever be. Don't scroll. The truth about Havoc starts right now. It began, as it often does, with misunderstanding, built on a foundation of fear. Havoc was not a pet. He was a retired professional, a decorated officer of the law, and he was living for the first time in a world that didn't understand his language. His partner and handler, Mike Sullivan, knew this better than anyone. Mike, 48, and walking with a permanent, agonizing limp courtesy of 3 shattered vertebrae and a titanium rod in his femur, had moved to this quiet Ohio suburb for one reason: peace. He'd been medically discharged, his career over. He'd brought his partner with him, because in the canine world, you don't just give back your partner. Havoc had been sold to him for $1 a formality that transferred ownership of the department asset to the man who was in reality his family. For a K9 officer, retirement isn't a gold watch. It's an honorary discharge, often into a world of confusion and triggers. Havoc had earned his. But you can't just flip a switch. You can't tell a guardian to stop guarding. You can't tell a warrior to ignore the call to battle when he hears it. The community Maple Creek Estates was a master-planned haven of beige siding HOA rules and the perception of safety. It was a place where the lawns were uniformly green, the mailboxes identical, and the greatest perceived threat was someone parking their pickup truck in the street overnight. The arrival of Mike Sullivan and K9 Havoc 6 months prior had been tense. Mike was a quiet man, scarred inside and out, who kept to himself. And Havoc was impossible to ignore. He was a jet black, 80-kilogram shepherd, his head the size of a cinder block, his amber eyes holding an unnerving, calculating intelligence. He was out of spec for the breed, a throwback to a more primal-looking line. When he walked, it wasn't a prance, it was a patrol. His head swiveled, his nose tested the air he scanned. The other dog owners with their retrievers and doodles would pull their pets close, crossing the street to avoid him. Havoc didn't care. He wasn't there to make friends. He was on watch. The trouble started 3 nights ago. At precisely 2:17 a.m., Mike knew, because he looked at the clock, Havoc had unlatched the back screen door. It wasn't a trick Mike thought he'd trained out of him. It was a trick Havoc had never used in retirement. It was a work move. He'd slipped out into the humid night air and taken up a position at the edge of the community common area, a grassy patch that contained a small playground. He didn't bark. He didn't chase. He just stood statue still, staring at the children's sandbox. A low, sub-audible growl vibrated from his massive chest. It was the sound Mike hadn't heard in 3 years. It was his tell. It was the sound he made when he was on scent. Not drugs. Not a human. The other one. The one Mike's nightmares were made of. The first complaint was an email from the HOA citing aggressive animal behavior. The second was the Ring camera video posted to the neighborhood forum captioned, "Dangerous wolf dog loose in playground." The third tonight was a physical confrontation. The knock on Mike's door wasn't friendly. It was the rapid, indignant rapping of Karen Peterson, HOA president, a woman who wielded her clipboard like a weapon. She was flanked by 2 other nervous-looking neighbors, Bob from 4A and Janet from 3B, the one whose cat was missing. Mike had seen it in her own window that afternoon. "Mike, open up. We need to talk about your animal. Karen's voice was sharp, cutting through the thin drywall. Mike sighed, massaging his bad knee, the ache a constant reminder of his failure. He opened the door. Havoc was instantly at his side, moving from a deep sleep to full alert in a fraction of a second. He didn't bark or growl. He just was. He positioned himself slightly in front of Mike, a silent, furry wall, his eyes fixed on Karen. His presence alone made the small posse take a step back. See? See? Janet whispered. It's a killer. That thing was out again last night. Karen began, her voice tight with anger. She refused to look at Havoc, instead directing her ire at Mike, terrorizing the neighborhood. My kids are afraid to go near the playground. Janet's cat is gone. He's growling. He's threatening. He's a menace. This is a family community, Mike, not a war zone. He looks like a weapon. He is a weapon. He's trained to kill, isn't he? He's not threatening anyone. Karen, Mike said, his voice tired, raspy. He's on edge. I'm working on it. He's never left my property unattended, except for that one time, and I'm fixing the latch. Unattended. That video of him at the playground looked pretty on the loose to me. Mike Bob chimed in, finding his courage. He's a liability. What if he snaps? What if he hurts a child? We all respect your service, Mike. We really do. But that's not a pet. The word weapon stung Mike more than the insult. He looked down at Havoc. He saw the graying muzzle. He saw the chipped canine tooth from a bite and hold that went bad. He saw the scar over his left eye from a piece of rebar. He saw the dog who had licked tears from his face after his first partner, Officer Davis, had been shot and killed during a routine traffic stop. He saw the dog who had refused to eat for 3 days, who had slept on the cold tile floor of the hospital for a week after Mike's own surgery, growling at any nurse who came too close to his handler. He's retired, Karen. He's got sensitivities, Mike tried to explain, feeling foolish. PTSD, post-traumatic stress, just like some of us. Oh, please. Karen snapped, her patience gone. Don't hide behind that. It's a dog. A dangerous, unstable dog. I don't care if he has a 401k and a therapist. The HOA covenants are clear. Nuisance animals. Dangerous breeds. We are holding an emergency meeting tomorrow. The entire community is invited. We have the votes, Mike. You have 48 hours to rehome him, or we will start legal proceedings to have you both removed for endangering the community. The door slammed. The threat was real. Rehome him. The words were an absurdity, a physical impossibility. You don't rehome your partner. You don't rehome your left arm. You don't rehome the being that saved your life, the only living creature that truly understood the darkness you both shared. Mike locked the deadbolt, the ultimatum hanging in the air, like the smell of poison. Havoc, sensing his handler's profound distress, nudged his massive head under Mike's hand and let out a low, mournful whine, a sound so at odds with his reputation it was almost comical. Havoc wasn't just a K9, he was the K9. His call sign was H1, Havoc 1. His pedigree was a list of legends from German and Dutch lines, but his heart was pure warrior. He'd been paired with Mike straight out of the academy, a young brash handler, and a dog that was frankly too much for everyone else. He'd flunked the sociability tests spectacularly. He wasn't interested in being petted. He wasn't interested in playing fetch. He was interested in work. But he shattered every department record in apprehension tracking and narcotics detection. He was a force of nature. Their specialty, however, became something darker. By chance, They were first on scene at a building collapse. Havoc, trained for narcotics, had shown an uncanny ability to find. He'd located 3 survivors under tons of rubble. The department, seeing an opportunity, sent them for advanced training. Urban Search and Rescue, USAR, and Tragically Human Remains Detection, HRD, or cadaver detection. Havoc had a nose that could find the smallest trace of life or death under tons of concrete. He'd worked the aftermath of tornadoes in Oklahoma, mudslides in California, and the grim, quiet woods of abduction cases. He was a hero decorated twice for valor, with more finds than any K9 in the state's history. But the job takes a toll. The sensitivity Mike mentioned to Karen wasn't a lie. It was a massive understatement. Havoc was haunted. His primary trauma trigger wasn't gunfire. It wasn't shouting. It was the sound of stress. The groan of twisting metal, the crack of splintering wood, the vibration of shifting earth. These were the sounds that preceded a find. These were the sounds of disaster. These were the sounds that meant he was about to smell death. The incident that ended both their careers happened 3 years ago. A narcotics raid in an abandoned textile mill on the riverfront. It was supposed to be a simple search and clear. The suspect, a low-level dealer, fled to the 3rd floor. Mike and Havoc gave chase. The suspect, desperate and high, had set a fire to cover his escape. But the building was old, water damaged and rotten. The floor weakened by the fire, and the weight of the officers gave way. Mike remembered the feeling of weightlessness. A scream, maybe his. Then impact. Searing pain. Dust. Darkness. He was pinned beneath a steel I-beam. His leg was crushed. He couldn't breathe. He passed out. He woke to barking. Frantic, desperate, choked barking. Havoc was there. He wasn't pinned. He could have escaped. But he was there, digging at the plaster and licking Mike's face, shielding his head with his own body, as debris and hot embers continued to fall. Havoc barked for 5 straight hours. His throat was raw, bleeding. But he didn't stop. He barked until the rescue crews, guided by the sound, located them. Mike's leg was shattered beyond repair. Havoc had internal injuries, smoke inhalation, and a new profound crippling claustrophobia. They both retired on the same day in a small ceremony with a plaque and a folded flag. 2 heroes broken and put out to pasture. So yes, Mike knew that dog. He knew every twitch, every ear flick. He knew the difference between the mailman bark, the squirrel bark, and the low, soul-shaking growl of a find. This new behavior, this obsession with the sandbox, wasn't random aggression. It wasn't senility. It was work. Havoc was alerting. He was telling Mike in the only way he knew how that something was wrong. Something was down there. "What is it, boy?" Mike whispered, kneeling on the floor, his bad knee screaming in protest. "What are you smelling?" Havoc just looked at him. The picture of frustration, then walked to the back door, staring into the night toward the playground. He was on duty. He was the only one who knew it, and his 48-hour clock was ticking down. The next morning, the 47th hour, the hostility was a physical weight. When Mike took Havoc for his morning patrol, a short leashed walk around the block, the neighborhood was alive with whispers. Neighbors he'd never even spoken to were out on their lawns pointing. "That's him. That's the one." Blinds snapped shut. Bob from 4A was filming him from his window. Greg, the community groundskeeper, who used to slip Havoc a beef-flavored treat, now just nervously fiddled with his leaf blower, refusing to make eye contact. Havoc felt the rejection. His noble head, usually held high, was low. His tail, usually a proud flag, was tucked. The shame wasn't his. It was Mike's. Mike felt he had failed his partner, bringing him to this sterile, fearful place that couldn't see past the scary exterior. He felt the same helplessness he'd felt under that I-beam. Trapped. The walk was a failure. Havoc didn't care about the usual spots. He didn't care about the fire hydrant. He pulled 175 pounds of pure focused muscle straining against the tactical harness. He was dragging Mike, who was limping badly, toward the playground. "No, buddy, not today. We can't." Mike pleaded, his voice low. "You're not helping our case." But Havoc was insistent. He planted his paws, a four-legged anchor. He let out a low, frustrated woof. It wasn't a request. It was a demand. He looked at Mike, his amber eyes piercing, and then looked at the playground. "Handler, you are ignoring my alert. Do your job." "Okay." Mike sighed, defeated. "Okay. 5 minutes. Show me. What's got you so spooked?" Mike let the leash go slack. Havoc trotted, not ran straight to the sandbox. It was a new, brightly colored plastic rectangle filled with clean white sand surrounded by that newfangled synthetic turf. Empty, of course. Havoc didn't get in. He circled it. He lowered his head-nose, hovering an inch above the sand, moving sniffing processing. And then the growl started. Low, constant, aimed at the exact center of the box. "Havoc aus. Leave it." Mike commanded the formal German word for out. The dog ignored him. He looked at Mike, whined a high-pitched, anxious sound, and went right back to growling at the sand. He was agitated, deeply distressed. "What is it? A snake? A raccoon den?" Mike stepped over the low plastic wall. He kicked the sand. Nothing. Just sand. But Havoc was now listening, head tilted, ears, satellite dish forward. Suddenly Havoc lifted his head, sniffed the air, and barked. One sharp, loud alarm bark. Not at the sand, at the sky. Mike looked up. The sky, clear moments before, was a sickly, bruised, greenish yellow. The air had gone dead calm, heavy and wet. The scent of ozone and wet pavement filled his lungs. A classic Midwestern supercell was boiling on the horizon. "Oh hell," Mike muttered. "Tornado weather." The county-wide warning sirens began their ominous wail. The first rumble of thunder was distant, but Havoc heard it. This was his other trauma. Storms with their low-frequency rumbles terrified him. They sounded too much like buildings collapsing. He began to tremble. His whole body shook. Mike's heart broke. "Okay, buddy, that's it. Let's go. Shelter. Now. Home." He grabbed the harness, expecting the dog to bolt for the house for the safety of the interior bathroom, where he usually rode out storms. But Havoc did the unthinkable. The thunder cracked again, closer this time. A sharp crack that sounded like timber splitting. He yelped in terror, his muscles bunched, and he began to dig. Not in the sandbox, but at the synthetic turf beside it. He clawed at the ground frantically, with a desperation Mike had never seen, tearing up strips of fake grass, sending black earth and mulch flying. Havoc, no plats down. Mike roared, using the German command for down, the most serious one in their arsenal. It was the "stop what you are doing, or you will die" command. Havoc had never ignored it. He ignored it now. He was in a frenzy. He was beyond commands. He was simultaneously terrified of the storm and possessed by an urgent primal need to get into the ground. The rain started not as a drizzle, but as a deluge, a wall of water. In seconds they were soaked. Another flashbang of lightning and thunder directly overhead. Havoc screamed a painful, terrified sound. But he didn't run. He stopped digging and lay down on the spot he'd been tearing at, pressing his 175-pound body into the mud as if to shield it. He was trembling so violently Mike could see it from 10 feet away, but he refused to move. It was the most heartbreaking display of courage Mike had ever seen. His dog, his partner, was choosing to endure his greatest terror, to protect a patch of mud. My God! Havoc. Mike choked out rain and tears mixing on his face. He scrambled over, kneeling beside his partner, shielding the dog's head with his own body. What is it? What's down there? Show me, buddy. He put his hand, his human hand, on the ground where Havoc lay. And he felt it. Not the rumble of thunder. A vibration. Low, rhythmic grinding. It was the sound of the earth failing. The sound of gravel and soil in motion. The sound from the warehouse. Mike, get that freak off the lawn. It was Karen Peterson on her covered porch, filming with her phone, her voice barely audible over the roar of the rain. He's destroying the common area. That's it. I'm calling the police. I'm having him put down. Karen, get inside. Mike bellowed, his voice pure cop, a roar that cut through the storm. Get everyone away from the playground. Now call 911. Tell them it's a sinkhole, a structural collapse. His tone, the sheer, unadulterated terror and authority, finally cut through her anger. What Mike saw, the groundskeeper huddling by the maintenance shed. Greg, the sand. It sinks right. After a rain, you have to keep filling it. Greg nodded, pale as a ghost. It's a void, man. The whole thing is hollow. Get back. Mike looked at the sandbox. The rainwater wasn't pooling. It was swirling. A tiny, greedy whirlpool was forming in the center, sucking sand and water down into a dark, unseen maw. Havoc hearing. Mike's command voice, the scene is not secure tone, finally relaxed his guard. He had passed the message. He let Mike grab his harness and drag him backward. Mike's bad legs screaming as he pulled the 175-pound dog and his own dead weight through the mud. They stumbled onto the concrete path just as the ground groaned. It was a sickening, tearing, sucking sound. The sirens of fire and rescue. Their whoop-whoop, distinct from the storm sirens, blended with the tempest. The area was cleared. The residents of the 4 units bordering the common area were evacuated, huddling in the small community clubhouse. The fire chief and a city engineer, grim-faced in yellow slickers, listened to Mike's report. They looked at the vortex in the sandbox. They looked at Havoc, who was sitting in the back of Mike's truck, wrapped in a blanket, shivering but quiet. Your dog. He heard the ground moving. The engineer said, his voice awed. That vibration. It's the soil and fill shifting. He probably heard it long before any instrument could. He's got better ears than our geophones. The diagnosis was terrifying. A nightmare of civic negligence. The development had been built in the late 70s. The playground, it turned out, was built directly over a massive 10-foot diameter corrugated storm drain that had been improperly decommissioned and wasn't on any modern map. For decades, water had been leaking, eroding the soil, creating a massive unseen cavern. A sinkhole just feet beneath the children's play area. Greg's topping off of the sand was just adding weight to the fragile, paper-thin roof of the void. The storm was the final straw. Havoc wasn't being aggressive, Mike explained, his voice thick with emotion, to the small, stunned crowd of evacuees. He was alerting. The sound, the vibration, the smell of the wet, moving earth. It's the same signature as the mill collapse. He thought I was down there, or that we were all in danger. He was trying to dig us out. He was trying to save us. He was doing his job. He was just being Havoc. Just after 4 a.m., as the storm passed, the ground gave way. It wasn't loud. It was a deep, wet thump, a sound of finality. The entire playground, the slide, the swings and the sandbox vanished into a 40-foot-wide crater. A nearby gas line, unsupported, ruptured with a hiss. The crews ready for it shut it down. The hole was deep enough to swallow a 2-story house. It was a grave waiting for a victim. Karen Peterson stood at the police tape, her robe clutched tight, her face sheet white. Her son's bedroom was the closest to the crater. He often snuck out at night to sit on the swings. She looked at the chasm, then at Mike, then at the truck, where Havoc was now sleeping exhausted. She just started to cry, silent, racking sobs. The sun rose on a scene of devastation, but also of profound, miraculous relief. No one was hurt. No lives were lost. And the hero of the hour was not a man in a uniform, but a 175-pound German shepherd who was at that moment gingerly accepting a very large piece of bacon from Greg the groundskeeper. Greg, his eyes red, just kept petting Havoc's head. "You saved 'em, boy. My grandkids. They play in that sand. Every day. I'm so sorry. I thought you were. I'm so sorry." Havoc, in a move that shocked everyone, just licked the tears and bacon grease from the man's face. The Nextdoor app, once a hotbed of fear, was now a flood of gratitude and shame. The post with the monster video was deleted. In its place, a new post from Karen Peterson. It was a photo of the crater, and then one of Havoc sitting nobly on Mike's porch. The text: "This is K9 Havoc. He is not a monster. He is a hero. He saved our children. He saved our homes. I was wrong. I was terrified, and I was wrong. I apologize to him and to his handler, Mike Sullivan." The story went viral, not as a dangerous dog story, but as a hero K9 story. The local news ran a segment not just on the sinkhole, but on K9 Havoc File H113 and his distinguished, painful career. They showed the footage from the warehouse rescue. They interviewed a stunned Mike. "He's the hero," Mike kept saying, his hand never leaving Havoc's head. "I'm just the guy who holds the leash." Later that week at the emergency HOA meeting, now a recovery and planning meeting, Karen Peterson stood up. I was wrong," she said, her voice shaking but clear. "I led a campaign of fear against a hero. I saw a monster, but I was the one who was blind. I moved that we not only rescind all complaints, but that the HOA budget immediately pay for Havoc's vet bills and food for life, and that the new park, when we rebuild it, is named the Havoc's Watch Playground." The motion passed unanimously with a standing ovation. We are taught to judge. It's a survival instinct. We see a massive dog with teeth and we see danger. We see a scarred veteran man or animal and we see damage. We hear a growl and we hear a threat. But we forget that loyalty has its own language, a language spoken not in words, but in actions, in sacrifice, in unwavering presence. We forget that guardians, true guardians, are forged in fire. They aren't always soft. They aren't always sociable. They are watchful. Havoc wasn't a dangerous dog. He was a protector living with the ghosts of a life of service. His trauma wasn't a liability. It was his superpower. He used the very thing that haunted him, the sound of collapse, the smell of death, to save the people who feared him. He was the silent guardian, the watchful protector, the hero Maple Creek didn't know it needed, but was lucky to have. Life in the neighborhood is different now. Havoc is still Havoc. He still patrols the yard. He still walks with a purpose. But the neighbors don't cross the street. They wave. They bring their own dogs to say hi to the local celebrity from a respectful distance which Havoc prefers. Greg and he are inseparable. The groundskeeper now carries 2 types of treats. And Karen Peterson. She's now his biggest advocate, leading a regional fundraiser for retired canines, ensuring these 4-legged veterans get the peace, respect, and medical care they've earned. The story of Havoc reminds us that the most profound courage often wears the scariest disguise. It reminds us to look past the muzzle, past the reputation, and into the heart. Because sometimes, the monster everyone is afraid of is the only one standing between them and the darkness. He is not a weapon. He is a shield. And he is and always will be a very, very good boy.